Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up, and we are going to be breaking down the NHL trade deadline that took place. We saw a lot of movement from the New York Islanders and also the Chicago Blackhawks, which are two teams that we cover. And then we also are going to take a deep dive later on into the first few weeks of the MLB season and what our teams have done. But first of all, before all of that, welcome in, Swig. How are you doing today?
Oh, not too bad, man. Ready to break down a couple of things that happen. We all know how much I care about hockey, so I'm excited to get in the deadline a little bit, and then dreading talking about baseball a little.
Yeah, I'm dreading talking about baseball too. But I mean, I always love talking baseball. But when the Cubs are playing the way they are, when the Yankees are playing the way they are, like it's not as fun as if they were playing well. But either way, we're gonna start getting into this hockey talk, and we're gonna start right off the bat. This is right off the stick, maybe should I say, with the New York Islanders. The Islanders, you called it. You called it. You said Kyle Palmieri will be a New York Islander. And he is. And coming over with him is Travis Zajac. Zajac, the longtime New Jersey Devil, he's been there his entire career, now ends up going over to New York. Both players come in with 18 points. What do you like about the move?
Well, first of all, I like that I called it so I can get stroked off on here again. I'm glad we're setting this up so I can just brag about how great I am. I know that's what everyone listens to this for. But all jokes aside, man, I do really like the pickup. It's kind of interesting to see the Islanders and Devils making a trade, but we're starting to see a little bit more of that intra-division trade around the NHL this year with the Sabres and Bruins, for example, and the Rangers made a trade with the Devils 2 or 3 deadlines ago. So in this sense, the Islanders went out and got arguably the best consistent scorer on the market that was available to them. I'd say it would be between Palmieri and Taylor Hall, and Taylor Hall ended up going to the Bruins. But Palmieri has been a consistent, underrated scorer for the Devils for half a decade now. He's only 30 years old. He's on an expiring contract, and it's a move that signals that the Islanders are all in. They are trying to win it all right now. Palmieri is the part of the trade that really is significant for them. Travis Zajac doesn't really move the needle too much anymore at this point in his career. And we talked about the Islanders. They're going to go out, make a move after Anders Lee got injured. Palmieri made a lot of sense, and they went out and got it done.
And Palmieri, we talked about the injury to Anders Lee, like you said. And Palmieri's a power forward, someone that can put the puck in the back of the net, which is a similar skill set, shoots from the right side as opposed to the left side with Anders Lee there. But I still think they got a good player here with Kyle Palmieri. He could bring a lot to this team. And you say Zajac at this point in his career doesn't bring too much. I think he brings enough to this team that where you're getting some sort of production out of him. I mean, you look at what he's played around in New Jersey, not a lot of good talent. You put him on a team like the New York Islanders, you're playing with players opposite of him that have been in the league for a while. He's a veteran presence that can come in and really instill a culture as they head towards the postseason. And this team, I mean, they made a solid run last year, getting all the way to the finals, coming up short. But if you look at this team going forward, I think Travis Zajac's an underrated acquisition to go along with Palmieri. Those two could put the Islanders over the top.
And I like in terms of Zajac, I think he's more of a clubhouse presence. Like he's not the player he once was on the ice. I mean, he's older than Palmieri. He's a guy that's on an expiring contract as well. So both of these guys are likely to be rentals that go elsewhere in the summer as unrestricted free agents. But to me, Zajac is a bottom six forward. So at best, you play him as your third line center in my mind. I just don't see him having a huge impact there in terms of scoring because the Islanders aren't a great offensive team as it is. Now, these two additions help, but to me, Palmieri is a legitimate top six winger who's going to provide scoring for you. And any points you get out of Zajac to me is a bonus offensively. I think you can expect him more possibly in a penalty killing role, possibly as a clubhouse leader more than anything else. But the Islanders also have a couple of guys like that he can play with. The Cal Clutterbucks, the Leo Komarovs of the league. I know Komarov's actually been playing on Barzal's line a little bit recently, which is interesting, but it's been effective. To me, it's very clear that Palmieri is the centerpiece of the return. And the Islanders, we've talked about them being in salary cap hell due to some of their contracts. I think it's important to note the Devils did retain half of the salaries for both Palmieri and Zajac in the trade.
That's what I was going to bring up next, because you mentioned the salaries of both of these being rentals, and that makes sense because you look at what they've done, and they're bringing in someone on expiring contracts. We talked about how they're really pressed financially, but I mean, it makes sense for a team like the Islanders. One thing here, you look at what they gave up. Now let's look at what they ended up giving up for both of these players: a 2021 first round pick, a 2022 fourth round pick, a conditional one at that. AJ Greer and Mason Yopes also went the other way. So how do you feel about the what the Islanders gave up? Do you think it was a little bit too much, or do you think it was the right price?
The first round pick to me is the only part of that that really matters. And that first round pick is going to be in the mid to late 20s at the earliest. So from what I understand, it's not a super strong NHL draft class. And if you're going to give up a first round pick, it's not a bad return to give it up for. The only other first round pick that got traded at the deadline was for Nick Foligno. And I think Palmieri is a superior player to Nick Foligno at this point in his career. No disrespect intended, but it's in terms of that primary scoring option, you're going to get more out of Palmieri theoretically if he's healthy, right? In terms of the two prospects in Yobst and Greer, Yobst is a late bloomer. He's 25 years old. He's struggled in the AHL. So I don't see him having a huge impact for a Devils team that frankly isn't much above an AHL team at the moment. And in terms of AJ Greer, he's not much younger. He's been a depth player who's played a little bit in the NHL for the Avalanche, might fill a bottom six role. So to me, neither of those prospects are a serious threat to turn into quality NHL players, for lack of a better term. They're not going to turn into top end players. I'm pretty confident saying. So that first round pick is a little bit steep for a very good but not great player, I would say. But it's a risk that contending teams that are looking to win it all, they need to make those moves. They need to be pushing all their chips into the table, showing they're all in. And there's no doubt that that's exactly what the Islanders are doing.
Yeah, that's a cup winning move. I don't have any issues with that. First round pick in a draft, as you mentioned. I mean, it's a fact. You look at the 2021 draft class. There's not someone that just stands out right away. And even given where this pick's going to be, like, you know that your team's contending, you know what you're getting back, so you know it's going to be a late first round pick at best. So a team like New Jersey can, I mean, it goes in the Islanders' favor because you're getting better on the ice, and that's what you're trying to do this season to go to win a cup. And they also got better on the ice, potentially, with another trade they pulled off, bringing in Braden Coburn. And Coburn, they gave up a 2022 seventh-round pick for him. He played with believe he was with Anaheim and also with Tampa Bay last season. For the last few years, he's been with Tampa Bay, ended up winning a Stanley Cup. I feel like he's just a depth defenseman right now, but he could also, he comes into that locker room having won a Stanley Cup, having been there and done that in a high level. I feel like a veteran defenseman there is just basically a locker room move.
I mean, he got traded for a seventh round pick in 2022, right? It's clear that he's 36. He's at the tail end of his career. It's basically the equivalent of in semi-pro when the guy got traded for a washing machine. It's just a change of scenery thing where the Islanders will only play Coburn in the playoffs if they have an injury to their defense core, because that's obviously the strength of the team. He should be a clubhouse presence or a kind of off-ice de facto coach, possibly. I do not see him having much of an on-ice role, and ideally for the Islanders, he wouldn't have one at all. He is just there to provide some depth. He played, I want to say 12, 14 games for the Senators earlier this season. He's had a solid career, but don't overanalyze this one. It's a depth move and nothing more.
Yeah, and the Islanders going forward, they have a pretty solid team so far this season. What they've been able to accomplish, the goaltending's been phenomenal out of Sorokin and also Varlamov. Do you think that this is right now, with the addition of all these players at the deadline and what they did, do you think that they could be cup or front runners for the Stanley Cup?
I think it's possible. They definitely, even with this trade, I think they're still stronger defensively than offensively. And if they end up running into a team like the Capitals, which seems likely considering they're in the same division and with the playoff format this year, that's going to be a clash of contrasting styles right there. The Capitals were also incredibly aggressive at the deadline, giving up a haul for Anthony Mantha, also trying to add to their already potent offense, right? But yeah, those two teams, along with I'd say the Maple Leafs in the Canadian division, those are to me the three leading contenders in the Eastern Conference, and they all were very aggressive at the trade deadline. The Maple Leafs were the team that gave up the other first round pick for Foligno, like I mentioned a minute ago. So you see all these teams. The Capitals gave up Vrana and Panik and a couple of picks for Mantha. So these teams are all going in for it. I think the Islanders have the best defense. I do not think they have the best offense. And it's highly likely that they would have to beat both the Capitals and the Leafs to get to the finals.
Yeah, whenever you're going up against someone like Alex Ovechkin in the playoffs, it's not really good. But hey, if you can draw the Maple Leafs in the playoffs, we all know what they do year after year. So you could be choking on a Maple Leaf there. So something that happens every single season for Toronto. I don't think that they will ever get over the hump, but that's just my thoughts on that. Real quick, the New York Rangers, they did not make any moves. Are you a little bit surprised by that, or you think it was the right strategy for the team?
Not at all. It's mostly a young team. The few veterans that are on the team are on long-term contracts that they're not in position to trade. Brendan Smith is the only guy I thought who might have been traded for a third or fourth round pick, but the Rangers were not in the position to do anything unless they were one of those teams like San Jose that might have been facilitating a trade and getting a fourth round pick for cap space. But that's about it. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, it's weird because you saw the Islanders, they went all in, they pushed their chips in. The Rangers sort of just stayed put. And then the Blackhawks, we'll get to them right now. The Chicago Blackhawks, Stan Bowman, I don't know what the heck he's thinking. He traded almost every single person on a one-year contract he had, and then some, to bring in some younger depth players that potentially helps your team now, but really helps your team in the future. It's just an interesting choice. Of course, he brings back a former Blackhawk. How could he not? You get Vinny Hinostroza coming back, and he was someone that's already made his debut with this team this season. And I really like him on this line. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's got Kubalik, Kurashev, Hinostroza. And I mean, they're putting up point production every single night on that line. And so far, he's the main guy I want to talk about first. I think he comes in, and his second tenure with the Blackhawks here could be something nice.
I think he'll be a solid middle six player that's going to be consistent for them, who can move up and down the lineup if necessary. I do want to point out, though, in addition to not only bringing him back again, which is something we've discussed on the show before, the Bowman seems to have a real affinity for making trades with the Hurricanes, the Coyotes, the Panthers, or now Vegas. He just seems to have a few favorites, and we'll get into the trade he did make with Vegas here in a minute. But you ever notice that like 90% of his trades are with those four teams?
100%. He's always like, oh, Arizona, what do you have? Oh, let me give you Jalmerson. Let me give you Antti Ranta. Let me give you, he goes through the list and just dials up everybody. I mean, it's crazy. It is something, because even Dallas there for a little while. Yeah, Johnny Oduya, Patrick Sharp, like he's sending them everywhere. And it's just, he gets these clicks with these GMs, and year after year, he's like, all right, you're going here, you're going here, you're going here. And it's the same teams every single year. And it's just so strange.
It is kind of weird, isn't it? And Bowman's actually going to be the GM for the Olympic team. We found out not too long ago. So I'm curious to see how he does there. But circling back to the Blackhawks here, I mean, we have seen the patterns of him trading with a few teams before. In terms of Hinostroza, I can't say I'm surprised that he was brought back. He's somebody who, like I said, has the versatility and consistency, who should be a solid piece to the lineup. I thought it made sense to sell on Soderberg as well on that expiring contract. He played pretty well, brought in really late in the process after the injuries to Doc and the Jonathan Toews situation to provide some center depth, but he ended up, I think, fulfilling his role very well and ended up being turned into an asset.
I liked what Soderberg brought to this team. He was a big body on the power play, someone that really screened the goaltender well, and he brought a lot to this roster in that factor. But I think the reason that he was dealt, yes, it's a one-year contract. He was brought in late into the process. You also got to factor in, he was signed when Dylan Strome's contract wasn't even settled yet. So they needed a center, someone that could come in. But now you look, you're like, okay, I'm fine with the development of Pius Suter, who's playing center. I'm fine with the development of Philip Kurashev, who's played center. Kirby Doc's back and healthy. Dylan Strome's there. You still have pieces that can move around and play the center position. And you're like, hey, if I can get something for Carl Soderberg, and boy, did he ever. He went back to Colorado, got two pieces that are really nice. I think it was Borgstrom and Rolston, if I'm not mistaken on that one. And I'm honestly surprised he didn't try to get Brandon Saad back with Soderberg.
Yeah. Do you think Colorado would have taken Zadorov back? Because I don't.
Yeah, Zadorov was a healthy scratch last night, so that's something to keep an eye on. But Soderberg, well, let's talk about real quick about the players they got rid of. And Soderberg was someone that on that power play, I liked him a lot. He's a goal scorer. For given how old he is, he still does a good job of putting the puck in the back of the net. He's gone. Madison Bowie, he was a defenseman. There's sort of just like a random replacement there with Stillman. They ended up bringing in. But Lucas Carlson, a young defenseman's gone. Matthias Janmark, 50% of the salary was retained on his move. He goes to Vegas. That's the one you were talking about. Do you want to talk about Janmark real quick?
Yeah, that's the other one I wanted to mention. And I do want to get into the Zadorov situation in just a minute, at least briefly. But to me, Yanmark is a guy who has exceeded expectations coming in late on that 1 year contract as well, coming off of a very good playoff run with the Stars. He ended up, I think, exceeding expectations a little bit. And while they're retaining some salary, I think that also increased the level of the draft picks they got back to facilitate that trade, because Vegas is also in a bit of a cap crunch. Ended up getting a second and a third, I believe. And I think they, all things considered, got a very strong return for a player who's going to be probably on the third line in Vegas.
Yeah, he probably will. He probably will be on the third line, but that's a solid option on a third line. I mean, Matthias Janmark there for a while was one of the most consistent hockey players on this team, and he really helped me out so far this season on FanDuel, so I'm a little upset to see him part ways, but he did a good job of putting the puck in the back of the net, especially against Dallas. I think he scored 3 goals against Dallas, which was his former team, so that was always a fun play. But another one there, Matthew Highmore was traded, and this one really upsets me. And you're going to be like, what are you talking about? You got Adam Gaudette back, and a lot of people like Adam Gaudette, but Matthew Highmore, this pains me. He's someone that just came in and played with his nose down every single time he was on the ice. Never took a shift off. Just forechecked till no end. He showed up in the playoffs last season. He was there, provided a little bit of scoring in that series against Vegas. And I love Matthew Highmore for forechecking, back checking, making these little plays, and just the neutral zone. He was really solid at doing those things. And I know Gaudette probably has more upside, but it feels like Alexander Nylander all over again here.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the energy and the relentlessness that Highmore would bring. I think Gaudette is a bottom six forward as well. I don't see a ton of upside with him. To me, he's more of a depth piece who can play a little bit on the wing, a little bit at center. So I'm curious to see how the Blackhawks use him, assuming he recovers from the whole Vancouver situation. I don't know if any listeners are familiar with that. I thought it was at least mildly surprising that Vancouver was able to make any trades just because of the uncertainty of their whole situation. But hoping that Gaudette does fully recover and get back to playing hockey soon. I don't foresee him having a huge role, because to me, he's in a similar spot to where Janmark and Soderberg were at, where they don't really have a huge future with the Blackhawks. I don't see Gaudette being a super long-term piece either. I think he's more of a grinding third or fourth line forward who can provide a little bit of experience and versatility, but I don't see a ton of offensive upside.
Yeah, and real quick, before we end up getting into the situation with Nikita Zadorov, I actually have a counterpoint to that I think that will set up nicely. But you look at who else they got rid of. Lucas Wallmark, that was not a good signing from the start. He didn't bring a lot to this team, but it's whatever. They got something out of him, which is nice. Brad Morrison also left. He was actually the one that went to Florida for Vinny Hinostroza. And then the 2021 fifth round pick was also someone else that they gave up. And then they brought in Brett Connolly, Riley Stillman, Josh Dickinson, Hendrik Borgstrom, Ryder Rolston, a 2021 second, 21 fourth, 21 seventh, 22nd third. So they brought in a lot of picks, they brought in a lot of players, and they got rid of a lot of players.
Yeah, they've been busy is the short version there.
Yes.
They haven't made any, I'd say, super major moves in comparison to what the Islanders did, but they have made more of those under the radar type of trades than any other team in the last couple of weeks.
The Stan Bowman went full Billy Bean mode, if you will. But so what I see in this situation, and Nikita Zadorov is someone that could potentially now be exposed to Seattle, and someone that they could absolutely take if they're interested. Now, I don't know how much value you put into a body checking defenseman, because let's be honest, that's all that he is. Um, but I think right now, getting those players off your roster that could have been potentially taken, I think Brett Connolly, 100%. The reason he's on this team right now is to be exposed. I think what they're going to do is use one of their protections on Connor Murphy, who's expiring, and either expose Zadorov, Connolly, and Subban, the goaltender, and see if they're interested at that. I think that's your way to go because you don't want to expose Connor Murphy and have him potentially lost the same way you did Trevor Van Riemsdyk a few years ago.
Well, one thing you have to remember is that to be eligible to be protected, or even actually eligible to be exposed in the expansion draft, is they have to have at least one more year left on their contract after this season. So I am really curious to see what the contract situation is for some of these depth players who I have no doubt some of them were acquired so they could be exposed rather than some frankly more valuable players that the Blackhawks already have in place, right? But I do really want to get into the Zadorov thing really, really quick because he was scratched. They put in Mitchell for him, or excuse me, Riley Stillman for him. And we talked about at the beginning of the season how I was concerned that a guy like Zadorov and now Stillman, a 23-year-old who's mostly played in the AHL, is going to take important developmental time away from Ian Mitchell or Nick Beaudin. And it seems to be that that's exactly what's happening. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't like it one bit. I mean, Ian Mitchell's shown that he can play at this level. Actually, Bodan's been better than him. You're also seeing someone like Kulikov. I got to Kalinuk. That's his name. Kalinuk. I knew I'd get it right eventually.
You're thinking of Dmitry Kulikov.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the other player, but the Kalinuk, the dude that stepped up these last few games, he's put the puck in the back of the net, had a nice assist with the young line that ended up winning the game against Columbus. Brandon Hagel was the one that ended that one. But I think that kid's really good. And you're finally seeing these defensemen get their time. It's like, so-and-so, whether it's Beaudin gets something at the beginning of the year, then he gets his time off. You're giving these younger players minutes, and then you're just randomly shifting them up and down. So they're all getting some sort of NHL time, but it doesn't help not playing every single game in the National Hockey League. That's not going to help your developmental process. So putting someone like Stillman in there only hurts you because you could still have someone like Beaudin up on that top line with someone like Connor Murphy, and then have Mitchell in with a Kalinuk, and then you could also move a Duncan Keith around as opposed to having just a block right there with Stillman where it's not helping your developmental process at all.
Right. And to me, it's just you're not putting your young, talented players in the best position to succeed. The Blackhawks are in a bit of a tough spot because while they haven't been quite as strong as they were at the beginning of the season, they're still right in the middle of a playoff race and right neck and neck with a red hot Nashville team all of a sudden. And with only about 15 games left in the season at the time of recording, they're in a playoff push. And it would be a bit of a difficult time to be inserting the young players in now, because if you did put them in, they wouldn't be getting a lot of ice time. That would be pretty pointless too. So it's just, they're in a bit of a strange spot. I pretty much told you guys that anyone who would listen that you wouldn't like trading Saad for Zadorov though.
You did. You called that one from the start, and it's true. Right now, I mean, he's just a physical presence. He's someone that you put in when you face a division rival. Everybody's division rival this year. But when you face someone that's a little chippy, you just want someone that can give a few extra checks. He's someone that lights you up a little bit. He plays with a little bit of an edge, but outside of that, there's really nothing he can bring. So I think they're liking the development of this defense and the younger pieces. So next season, they could potentially expose Zadorov, and he might be someone that Seattle could take a look at.
Well, hopefully for Seattle's sake, they're smart enough to do better, frankly.
Yeah, only time will tell on that one. But let's get into the Chicago Cubs. We're going to switch over to baseball real quick. Cubs, White Sox, Yankees, Mets in that order coming up here on the Big City Sports Podcast. Chicago Cubs come in at 5-6 at the time of the recording. They have a day game on Wednesday that we will not be taking place before this one drops. 5-6. They had a little bit of a scare with the COVID bug. I believe 5 players are now on the injured list. You had Matt Duffy go on, a handful of relievers, including Daniel Winkler and Brandon Workman. So definitely something to be mindful of. We don't even know if they'll be playing baseball on Wednesday. Kyle Hendricks got scratched on Tuesday night with an illness, and it was sort of precautionary there. So first of all, the COVID situation with the Chicago Cubs is not ideal to start the season.
No, it's not. And before we get into anything else on the field, I just want to make sure we express, I hope any players involved recover fully and are able to get back on the field as soon as possible.
Yeah, and let's get into the on-field performance because man, I cannot watch this. I cannot watch the Chicago Cubs so far through 11 games without having a bucket to the right of me that I could just randomly just because it is absolutely pitiful that year after year you go out with the same exact lineup. I know Peterson's for Schwarber, but who can tell 11 games into the season which one's playing there? David Bodie, Darwin Barney 2.0. Doesn't know how to hit doesn't know how to hit a curveball. I mean, he's lost at the plate. He's hitting under 100. Under 100. And the guy started 8 games. Defensively, he's okay. Once again, Darwin Barney. He was a great defender, not knocking the guy, but he couldn't hit the lick. This entire core, we talk about contract years, and they might be feeling the pressure. It's only 11 games into the season, but this team has not been able to hit for the last 3 years, and it is absolutely asinine. Jason Hayward's bat comes back and forth so many times. Like, he'll have a random 400 month, and then he'll drop down to 100. And it's crazy. Rizzo always starts slow. Bryant's actually looked okay. Javi Baez is chasing every single ball that's 50 yards in the dirt, thinking that he's Tiger Woods on the back nine, just trying to drive one up the middle, but he can't do it. So it's an absolute disgrace. Their approaches at the plate are pitiful. They cannot drive in runs with runners in scoring position. And I am fed up watching this team night after night.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the headline with this team so far in the season is their shitty offense, and for the most part, the offense and especially the hitting with runners in scoring position has been about as useless as Fetty Wap's left eye. It's just not. They haven't gotten any consistent production out of it. Now, in terms of Bodie, you mentioned him. He's definitely off to a bad start, but I at least expect some of a bounce back because as of now, his batting average on balls in play is 0.59, and even though he's hitting it on the ground a lot, that's ridiculously low. So I think you can expect some of a bounce back from him. I think you can expect a little bit more from some of these guys going forward. Like you mentioned, I think Bryant's actually been one of the few pleasant surprises in the offense, but it has really been a struggle. You're just seeing these guys occasionally get to first base and then not moving anywhere off of it. And Baez, really quick, just as a side note, you see that throw that he yeeted into the stands from short against the Brewers?
I did. He's always such an energetic, interesting player. You don't know what you're going to get on a nightly basis from that guy, and that's what makes it so entertaining.
Yeah, he's definitely not a boring guy to watch, and I don't mean that bring into question his defense or anything. It's just a one-off kind of comical clip there if anyone hasn't seen it. But overall, they lost 2 out of 3 to a Pirates team that's projected to be one of the worst in the league. And the primary issues have just been they have not been able to string any hits together. They have not been able to come up with big big hits with runners in scoring position. So they're missing a lot of opportunities. They have been incredibly reliant on hitting home runs, and those are just sporadic at best.
They are sporadic at best. And this team, they're getting carved up big time by Freddie Peralta 2 times, JT Brubaker twice. Mitch Keller pitched well against him. I mean, these are household names. Let's be honest. These are people that you probably have not heard of and are just random pitchers that for some reason you cannot touch. Now, Brent Suter, left-handed pitcher for the Brewers, throws about 45 miles an hour. Now, I mean, Wilson Contreras ended up taking him deep on Tuesday, but if you look up his numbers against the Cubs, oh my gosh. I'll be honest. If the Cubs had to face a rotation of David Holmberg, let me see what other names I could fit in here. Let's go Doug Davis. Let's go Wandy Peralta. Let's go Wandy Rodriguez. And let's go Francisco Liriano. I think they no-hit him every single day of the week. All left-handed 88-mile-an-hour pitchers. I mean, they cannot hit they cannot hit high velocity. They cannot hit low velocity. They can only hit 93-mile-an-hour fastballs. And if it has some sort of movement, i.e. JT Brubaker, they cannot touch the baseball. So I am absolutely fed up with this lineup.
Yeah, maybe you can bring Jamie Moyer into that list, man. I haven't heard
I
some
knew
of
I was
those
forgetting
names in
one.
a long time.
Duck
I don't know
Davis.
how much the listeners are going to remember some of those guys, but I understand your point. It's definitely a lineup that has struggled against all pitchers, but primarily against left-handed pitchers who, for some reason, don't have a lot of velocity. We're just seeing some of the craftier, more veteran pitchers who aren't the flamethrowers that are predominantly across baseball now. It's giving them some troubles. So it's definitely something where I expect to see some regression to the mean in terms of improvement for the Cubs offense, but I do think it's going to be something they struggle with to an extent all season.
And last year, we saw this David Ross managed team, and it's tough to gauge a first year manager in a shortened season. But I'm going to be honest. So far to start this season, I haven't liked a lot of the moves that he's made. Now, he runs out the same lineup day after day. I'm fine with that. But there was a situation on Tuesday night's game where it was 2-1 Milwaukee. The leadoff batter Hayward got a base hit to center field. Then it was Sogard in the pitcher spot. And he had David Bodie in the on deck circle waiting to hit. And he was going to pinch hit for Alec Mills, who made the spot start, went 4 innings. And I'm sitting here as a fan, knowing that this team obviously right now cannot score a run to save their lives. It's a 2-1 ball game. Eric Sogard's up there swinging away. He gets out. David Bodie comes up. Regardless, he gets a base hit. Yeah. If I'm a manager, I'm saying, all right, Sogard, you're squaring around. You're putting Hayward at second. So we're getting 2 cracks at driving in a run and scoring position. Because if not, you're just having someone sit there at first base. David Ross has to start making these. I don't want to say analytical. He needs to start taking a small ball approach when you can't score runs, because otherwise you're not going to score runs. And he sort of did it a little bit by stealing Anthony Rizzo on Tuesday night, but I still feel like you have to get more. You have to find a way to steal bases, pinch run, drop bunts down, because like you said, they're so home run dependent that it's ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely more of an old school approach where you're looking for them to manufacture runs. The only thing is when you go try that approach where you're trying to manufacture a run, you're playing for one run in that inning, and that definitely does limit the potential of having a big inning and putting a crooked number up. It's a double-edged sword, is basically what I'm getting at. It's a way for teams to be more likely to get one run in an inning, but you're unlikely to win a game by doing that at most, what, twice a game?
Yeah, for sure. And last point here on the Cubs before we get into the White Sox. This again here on David Ross. He got outmanaged by Craig Counsell on Monday night. Simply as that. You have Adbert Alzolay, who gave you 5 solid innings, 5 2/3, 5 1/3, whatever it was. He gave up some big hits in that inning. He had bases loaded, 1 out. And the batter was Daniel Vogelbach, former Cubs farmhand. He elects to go to the bullpen to bring in left-hander Andrew Chafin. Well, Craig Counsell makes the playoffs every year on making these matchup moves. So what does he do? Luis Urias, right-handed batter. 3-run double. Boom. Ball game busted open. So you got to start playing a little bit smarter. I would have personally liked Alzolay versus Vogelbach on that one, but this is not a discussion we should be having 11 games into the season.
It's just a trend that you're seeing from a relatively inexperienced manager. I am curious to see if you see similar moves like that going forward.
For sure. Let's look at someone that has been in the league for a while as a manager, and Tony La Russa, and this White Sox team. Now, I don't think there's any question that if you asked a Chicago White Sox fan right now who the MVP of the team is, without hesitation, they would say Adam Eaton. What a fantastic job this guy has done coming back over to the south side of Chicago. I mean, he stepped in. He's hitting with launch angle. He kind of looks like Charlie Blackmon out there. I really like what I've seen out of Adam Eaton to start the season.
Yeah, the White Sox are also 5-6 at the time of recording, and they're just 5-6 for entirely different reasons. The offense has been decent for the White Sox. I still think they would like to see more from some of their primary options, especially Yoan Moncada, who's been off to a bit of a rough start. But Eaton has kind of helped keep them afloat. He's leading the team in home runs at the moment. It's just it's a little strange to see, but he's been their best all-around player. And I understatement of the year here, but a big upgrade over Nomar Mazara.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I really want to point out Jonathan Hood on ESPN 1000 earlier today. There was a debate on the Cubs, and his co host, who's a Cubs fan, David Kaplan, said, Oh, hey, they're talking about Magical. I like Magical. Well, yeah, but he's hitting 241. He'd be an all-star on your team, is what he told him.
Mm.
So big slam on that one. But you look at the White Sox. I mean, Lucas Giolito, this guy, he could potentially have a Cy Young season. And there's no James McCann anymore. So I think it's been a nice adjustment that he's made. Going with Yasmani Grandal being his catcher this season, I thought that was something big going into the offseason. But I feel like this White Sox team, they're ridiculed by injury so far to start the season. Of course, you have the freak injury to Eloy Jimenez. Tim Anderson goes down. He'll be back when this episode drops on Thursday. And I just feel like you're getting production. Yerman Mercedes came out of nowhere. I sort of briefly mentioned in the baseball preseason show, Yerman Mercedes made the opening day roster. That's the only thing I said. But this kid stepped up and hit.
Yeah, I want to give him a quick shout out. He started the season 8 for 8. He hit a 475-foot bomb in one of the games. I mean, he's been a lot better than you could expect. The White Sox, I only expect their offense to get better as they reintegrate some of their big time hitters back into this lineup. You get some guys finding their footing again. But even though the White Sox have been kind of middling around to start the season, they've been very entertaining, if nothing else. They had that crazy game against the Angels when Ohtani pitched and hit 102 as a pitcher and went deep in the first inning. And that whole Sunday night game was just crazy and a great spectacle of how watchable and entertaining they're going to be even at their worst. I do think we need to mention though, like the main reason that they're 5-6 is not because of their offense or their starting rotation. Their bullpen has been fucking horrible. We're 11 games into the season and they have blown 5 saves. I mean, that's just absurd.
Yeah, it has. But I think the one underlying factor, now this is one game out of the 11, so it's still a small sample size that I'm going to point out as a counterpoint. But you saw someone, um, it was Carlos Rodon was scratched, and I believe it was Keuchel on short rest that came in. The bullpen the rest of the day, Cody Hoyer came in, pitched well. I believe Evan Marshall and Aaron Bummer were also the pitchers that worked in that one. Now, obviously, that could be more recency bias based on that. But to your point, I mean, you saw Aaron Bummer blow a game early on in the season. I believe I want to say Oakland, whoever the first series of the season was, he blew that save. And then you look at Liam Hendricks, who has been a little bit up and down to start his White Sox career, I would say. But he's sort of been piddle paddling there a little bit. But I feel like down the stretch, this bullpen's going to find a way to figure it out. And these hiccups are just early season jitters.
You would think so, and that's not what I'm trying to imply is that they won't figure it out. But it's just I'm not trying to say that they're going to blow 45% of their saves the rest of the
They're
season
not the
because if they
Mets.
do that, that would be very shitty, and they would not go very far. But I do think at some point you have to realize that the bullpen's going to have to step up because there are going to be the occasional rough starts for pitchers or nights where your offense doesn't show up even when they are back to full speed. And I do think it might be a bit of a problem if the White Sox are in a position where they're going to rely on their bullpen to go 5 or 6 innings in a 9-inning game and not have a big inning against them at some point. I do think they would be a little hard pressed in that situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel one underlying factor we talked about underrated players going into the season, and we'll update you a little bit on some of them. Domingo Herman, minor leagues. We'll get into that when we get to the Yankees talk. Adbert Alzolay, bad start, good start. For the White Sox, it was Michael Kopech. He was that underlying factor, and out of the bullpen, he's looked good. 11 strikeouts. I believe he's 2-0 out of the bullpen. I want to say. I'm not going to fact check that one. I'm not entirely sure, but he's thrown multiple innings out of the bullpen and doesn't have an ERA right now. 0.00, as good as it gets. 11 strikeouts. He's looked good. Now I'm curious to see if they potentially work him up to getting a starting role on this team. But right now, he looks pretty solid in the bullpen.
Yeah, he's definitely provided a little bit of stability for a part of the team that has not been very good to start the season. I mean, he was a huge centerpiece when the White Sox acquired him, and he's had the injuries, the opt out the last couple of seasons. I think if he's able to prove that he can stay healthy, you see how electric and talented he really is. And I'm very excited and curious to see how La Russa manages him and how they implement him, whether as in a swing role, if they do try to use him only in the rotation or only in the bullpen bullpen this year while they build him up a little. But he's kind of a new toy that the White Sox have been waiting to play with for a long time and be able to use as creatively as possible. And they're finally starting to get that chance.
Last question, real quick, on the White Sox before we get into the dreaded Yankees talk. Um, Left field, are you shocked that you're not seeing a lot of Andrew Vaughn, a lot of Zach Collins? You're seeing more of a Nick Williams, if you will, a potential Leury Garcia starting over some of these younger players?
I'm not too surprised, especially because Vaughn is not even an outfielder by trade. He's a first baseman DH traditionally, and I'm sure they want to get him some reps at the very least in some minor league games before throwing him into left field right away. Because if there's one complaint or knock you'd have on Eloy Jimenez, he's a defensive liability. And if you throw a guy without any reps really in left field out there to replace him, you're just replacing one problem with a bigger problem. So I'm not surprised, at least initially. I do expect him to have a bit of a role later in the season.
Yeah, ask Dom Smith and ask Kyle Schwarber that question. I'm sure they'll give you a straight face. But all right, let's get into the Yankees talk. And first of all, I would like to apologize to every single listener out there that I led you to believe that Jay Bruce can play first base. He cannot. He stinks. Now, he's a horrible first baseman defensively. Now, you don't even want to get to the offense. Hitting 133, one home run. There's just nothing there. He's starting against a left-handed pitcher in Hyun-Jin Ryu. Why is that the case? I have no clue. They bring in Rougned Odor to play second base. I mean, I understand that this lineup is right-hand dominant. I understand that you're finally listening, Brian Cashman, Aaron Boone up in the front office trying to piece together this team. I understand that you're trying to put all of this together, realizing that they're right-hand dominant and you're trying to put left-handed pieces. But the left-handed pieces you got suck. I mean, it's a proven fact. Rougned Odor, there's a reason he was DFA'd. You look across the outfield, Aaron Hicks isn't hitting. Brett Gardner's way past his prime. Jay Bruce, I mean, this team is just absolutely insane. And once again, Aaron Judge is on the injured list. Or not yet, but he might. He's hurt right now. You look at this, you look at the Yankees, and it's the same narrative year after year. Jordan Montgomery, the only bright spot in the rotation outside of Garrett Cole. Outside of that, this team's a mess to start the season. Am I wrong?
No, do you see why I'm not ever high on my own teams yet? To me, some of these flaws are so visible, and I'll get into the offense, or more. Let me rephrase that. I'll get into the Odor trade separately. I want to just start with the offense now. As a pessimistic Yankees fan, I'm obviously not biased at all here, but a few minutes ago, we talked about the Cubs offense being like Fetty Wap's left eye. The Yankees offense have been as useless as FDR's legs. They have been so useless in runners in scoring position. They're going home run or nothing. And the middle of the order has been completely useless. We're getting nothing out of Judge, nothing out of Stanton, nothing out of Torres. Hicks has been completely useless. It has not been good all the way around. You can make the case that the bullpen has been pretty good to start the season and that Sanchez is off to a decent start, I guess, but it's just been nightmarish to watch. And the biggest culprit has been the offense, the lack of timely hitting, a lot of the same problems we're seeing with the Cubs. They're going for home runs, not getting enough of them, and it's costing them games.
And Giancarlo Stanton's been off to a very, very poor start this season. I believe he's hitting under 200, I think 174 if I want to guess. But I mean, it's just, he's up and down. This team, oh my gosh. I mean, the injuries always happen year after year. It doesn't matter. I don't understand. I don't know if it's a training mechanism. I don't know if it's the players that they have, but it's the same injuries year after year. Like you look at Luke Voigt, he starts the season out, and then you already automatically have that hole at first base. There's been a different first baseman starting for the New York Yankees on opening day every single year since 2017. And I mean, it's just so frustrating. I'm not even a Yankees fan, and it gets me worked up because I understand the high expectations. They should have them. But when I see them ranked number one on a power ranking list or ranked in the top 5, I'm sitting here like, are you guys watching baseball? Because to me, they're not even close to the top 5.
Yeah, I don't see it. The starting rotation has not been off to a great start. Montgomery had a very good start to open the season, wasn't quite as good in the second outing. Tyone is similar story. He pitched the game tonight as we were recording, and it was not a good one. Corey Kluber's second start was just downright awful. So it's mostly been Garrett Cole keeping the Yankees somewhat afloat. We haven't even mentioned they are also 5-6. So stop us if you're hearing a theme here, guys. But it's just the bullpen, I think, has been the bright spot for the Yankees, and Zach Britton is out for a while, and they're still staying afloat for the most part, even without him. Aroldis Chapman missed the first two games, going back to an incident for last year, but he's been fine to start the year. I like how Darren O'Day has pitched. Chad Green's been solid. Even Jonathan Loizaga, we're finally starting to see him realize some of the stuff he had, and he's actually pitched well, with you considering Boone's crush on him and how often he uses him. But the offense is very right-handed heavy, and right now it's also just entirely swing and miss and grounding into way too many double plays. I want to say they have 13 through the first 11 games. So the rare occasions where you do get a walk or a single, you just double them right off and they stand there like statues. It's been very frustrating to watch. The Yankees have not gotten much home run production from anybody outside of a 2 home run game from Kyle Higashioka of all people. So while I do expect to see some uptick, these guys are too talented to be this terrible for the whole season. I do think the offense is just going to have ups and downs because they are such a home run reliant team and because they're so right-handed heavy. And we're starting to see some of the problems that have existed under the surface for multiple years be more visible because of a rough start to this season. And hopefully we see something change. As a Yankees fan, I'd like it to get better, but I have some of the same concerns I did the last couple of seasons when they made it farther. And while that could obviously, and this could obviously turn around and the Yankees could have a week where they hit 20 home runs and go 6-1. It's perfectly conceivable. It's just not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, and I liked how you talked about the bullpen there for a little while. I think Justin Wilson's also a name. He just got back. He's looked good in his 2 appearances so far. But I mean, it's funny you bring up Higashioka because I was going to go with that point. I mean, he's played a decent amount of catcher, and Gary Sanchez. I think right now at this point, if there's ever a moment that Sanchez slips up, I think Higashioka has made a case to where he can go in there and start without any questions asked. I mean, he's the Francisco Cervelli. I don't even want to call Gary Sanchez Jorge Posada, but let's just say that he's the Francisco Cervelli as a pretty good 1B backup catcher is what I'm trying to get at there with Higashioka. But to your point, they're very right hand dominant with a lot of swing and miss, and it's kind of like the Cubs in a sense where they get on and they don't steal bases, and that's where you see the good teams in the league, like Atlanta that has Acuna, that has Albies, the occasional stolen base from someone like a Dansby Swanson. Like they have people that can run. And even the Twins, Byron Buxton gets on, he moves around. Like the teams that win still find a way to steal bases. And teams that are built with statues, like the Cubs, like the Yankees, like the White Sox to an extent, they still have some flashy pieces like Anderson and like Robert that can still run. There is no speed on these rosters. And when you have people that ground into double plays, it can really shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, Plaxico style. And that's what the Yankees have been doing all season for the most part. It's just like we talked about, a lot of double plays, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of runners left on base, a lot of runners in scoring position. One of the games the Yankees won, they had the bases loaded and nobody out twice and managed a total of 1 run in those situations, which infuriated me is the polite way to put it. They did manage to get away with that game because it was one that Garrett Cole pitched, but it's not a great formula considering that's only going to be the case 20% of the time. So the Yankees are obviously going to need to step up in a lot of ways. They have the talent to do it. The pitching staff, for the most part, I think has been off to a decent start, especially in the bullpen, but the offense has been a major problem so far. And the Rougned Odor trade kind of came out of nowhere. Now, full disclosure here, I have a soft spot for Odor because I hated Jose Bautista. And Odor's punch on him was just one of my favorite things ever. I loved it. And at the very least, Odor's a left-handed bat, but he doesn't play very good defense. He's not a high contact guy. He doesn't get on base very often. He's a lot of the same things that the guys the Yankees had already do. And the only difference is he's hitting from the left side of the plate. He did have a go-ahead hit in the 10th inning that helped the Yankees win on Sunday afternoon, but I don't get that one because the Yankees have Derek Dietrich at the alternate site, who is frankly a better player, who's also a left-handed bat, who has more positional versatility. To me, it was a weird pickup. The Yankees are not on the hook for anything financially. Texas is paying his entire salary, so it's just taking a flyer on him and seeing if he can rediscover any of that 30 home run power. But I think the more likely scenario is he just turns into the next Stephen Drew for the Yankees.
Ooh. Stephen Drew, that's a
He
blast
who
from
hit
the past.
159 in a full season once, Stephen Drew.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't think I'd be hearing Doug Davis or Stephen Drew on the podcast today, but here we are. This is the Big City Sports Podcast. We look at the Yankees real quick. The last thing that we'll talk about on them, Clint Frazier, someone that a lot of people peg to have a breakout season, is only sitting at 200 right now. It's still early on. Do you think that he has what it takes to potentially break out this season?
Yeah, I do. And I'd much rather see him getting the at bats than Hicks. And I think Gardner's been decent for the most part when he's played, but it was into the season. It was Frazier's going to be the starting left fielder, and he gets off to a bad start, and 8 games in, he's sitting 3 days in a row. I don't like that either. It's not giving him a fair chance. I do still think he has the talent to break out.
All right. Let's get into the Mets real quick. The Mets, last team we'll talk about, believe it or not, they're the only one of our 4 teams that are over 500. And the Mets, there's not really too much. It's a small sample size right now. They played a few 7-inning doubleheaders so far this season. They've played a total of 7 games. They're 4-3 right now as the time where we're recording this. They've only hit 4 home runs on the season. So the offense is still a little bit slow out of the gates. Dom Smith has 2, Pete Alonso has 1, Jeff McNeil has 1. But that's the only home run production they have. They're not scoring a lot of runs, but their pitching has been phenomenal. You've seen real quick. You've seen a good performance so far out of Jacob deGrom, who's been spoiled a couple times, and then also Taijuan Walker.
No doubt. And that the DeGrom thing's actually the main thing I wanted to talk about. I'm not going to lie to you. I hate the Mets. I feel bad for him. I feel so bad for him. I cannot, there have been countless instances of him pitching extremely well and then the bullpen blowing it for him, or him getting no run support, or some combination of both. He had more hits in his 2 starts so far this season than the rest of the lineup did. It's amazing, isn't it? And somehow, despite the fact that DeGrom has been, I'd say, the best pitcher in baseball the last couple of years, the Mets are 36-42 at his start since 2018. How in the goddamn fuck is that possible? And just so far in this season, he's had 2 starts blown for him already. So I feel bad for him. He deserves better. But outside of that, it's a small sample size, 4-3. They've had a couple games postponed, like you mentioned. So it's even harder to draw any meaningful conclusions for them than it is for the other 3 teams we talked about. But I wanted to point out, like, he's had so many starts where he's pitched extremely well, and he's had a lot of no decisions where his ERA is under 2 in that same time since 2018. And he's had more no decisions than wins. That is absurd. So it's just the Mets offense seems to just take the day off when he pitches, and they need to at least score a 1 run before they do that. Outside of that, I wanted to get your opinion really quick on the Conforto hit by pitch game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Mets have kind of had some controversy. At least they have fun talking points. First of all, on DeGrom. Actually, I'll answer your question first. So, Michael Conforto, I think it was the way he stands at the plate, right? He's got the stance where it's sort of like his arms are flopping like this. So I could see why that he leaned forward. Let's be honest about that. He leaned into the pitch. But the way he was set up, he did a good job of selling it just by turning. So I honestly think if the ball hits you and the umpire didn't call it like that, that if he physically thought that pitch hit him and he did not intentionally do it, give him the base, give him the win. That's what happened. That's what should have happened.
Yeah, to me, it's a tough one. Look, if there's one thing I've learned of a fan of teams that usually aren't very good, it's don't complain how you get wins when they come. So I'm not going to criticize any Mets fan for saying "Hey, they won fair and square." I don't think that's even false. I also think it's true though that pitch was clearly in the strike zone and Conforto leaned into it. So I think they should have had continued his at bat. I understand that he's got that batting stance, but he also doesn't have his elbow in the strike zone on every pitch. I mean, come on, man. I think they're both arguments are fair. Going back to DeGrom really quick and the lack of consistent run support. I mean, I've seen the support for him is like having infants at the bottom of a cheerleading pyramid. That's the support that he typically gets, and it's been consistent over multiple years. The Mets do have a good pitching staff overall, but the rest of their pitchers who aren't quite as good tend to get more run support, and it's got to be demoralizing. The bullpen has been shaky to start the season. Edwin Diaz had a rough go in one of his appearances, but I still think he's likely to revert back to what he was for most of 2020. He's too talented not to. They're an entertaining team as always, but they also have a lot of flaws.
I was hoping your analogy was going to take you to the support of a balloon when Lizzo sits on it. That would have been even better. But going to your
Mm.
point on Jacob DeGrom, now the pitching coach for the team I cover, USCB, his name's Taylor Baker. He played against Jacob DeGrom in college at Stetson University and said he was just as good of a shortstop as a pitcher. And that you talk about his 2 hits that he had in his start so far this season. I found that interesting that someone that played at the collegiate level thought that he was just as good of a shortstop as a pitcher. And if that's the case, maybe they probably shouldn't have paid Francisco Lindor.
I mean, if he's in the lineup hitting for himself, which he is now again, he's more likely to provide run support for himself than the rest of the lineup is.
But real quick, one hitter that's done a good job so far this season and a fantastic job, we'll point this out. About the only good hitter on this team. He actually leads the National League in batting average. 435 batting average for Brandon Nimmo, and he's an underrated outfielder. If you remember back, I believe it was 2017, the Milwaukee Brewers tried to make a trade with Carlos Gomez going to the Mets, and Brandon Nimmo was rumored to go to the Brewers, but that trade fell through due to medicals. So definitely interesting for Nimmo to stay put there. But so far in his Mets career, these last few years, he's really turned it around.
He has, and the Mets, unlike the rest of the teams we cover, really have a much more balanced left-right lineup overall, top to bottom. So I think they have the ability to be more consistently scoring a decent amount of runs. And again, they've had an even wackier schedule than the rest of the team so far, through no fault of their own so far this season. So I think once they get out of this initial spread of doubleheaders, we'll start to see them settle in a little bit. But it's just been very weird to start the year for them. One, yeah, just both with the pitching staff and the lineup. But they have a winning record, so who cares?
Yeah, they do have a winning record, and that beats the heck out of the Cubs, White Sox, and Yankees. But that's going to do it for the segment today. Talked some NHL trade deadline, got some baseball talk recapping. Next week, stay tuned. We're going to have a big. You want to know who's going to be the next great NFL player, and want to know who is going to be the next, like on this episode, not necessarily last season. In our preseason episode for football, Swig gave the Darnell Mooney talk. He let people know who Darnell Mooney was before Darnell Mooney. Get that next week. We're diving into some NFL draft stuff. We're going to tell you some of our sleepers, some of our best fits, and someone that you might think, oh, wow, why should I watch the draft on day 3? Because that guy's on the board. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week. A lot of draft sleepers. A potential guest might be in the work on that one. We'll stay tuned on that. But either way, that's going to wrap it up for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Check us out on all platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Leave a review, leave a like, 5 stars if you believe that we are 5-star quality. Head over to YouTube, see our pretty little faces, comment, do all that fun stuff. Check us out on Twitter at the Big City Sports PD. But other than that, for Swig, I am Dylan Kern signing off. This is the Big City Sports Podcast. We will see you next time.